Yeah, all good. All good. Just a nice, peaceful Saturday Arvo walk and beautiful spring day today. It's yeah, really nice early spring day. And I was just doing a bit of reflecting and thinking around. You tend to see more on social media and in the media, conversations around players or footballers that get released at an 18 scholarship level, and rightfully so. It's good to create awareness and the players, the footballers, I suppose you could make a case in point, need as much support as possible. But what I would say, in my opinion, doesn't seem to be as much said for players being released prior to under 16 or under 16. I mean, when you think about it, there's hundreds of players that get released under 16 from academies every year. And I'm guessing that's probably because at the end of a scholarship, the players have that opportunity to transition into professional contract. But when you think about it, when a player gets released, and hundreds of players at academies get released at 16 and don't get that 2-year scholarship, that sort of full-time football and education. And I think one of the important things around that too for me is that it's at that point, like in England, for example, where players at that age are doing like GCSE exams, and obviously that's an extra pressure as well, because they've got the pressure of the sort of GCSE grades and exams. And generally a lot of clubs, in my experience, will make a decision roughly May or even earlier. So at that point, obviously, it can be devastating, because a lot of players will have played from 9 up to that point, thinking, okay, we've got a chance. And I sort of was reflecting one time. I was doing a talk a couple of years ago at an academy, and I thought to myself, I was talking about like mental preparation for football, but I couldn't help think to myself that, you know what, I mean, the sort of players, even before they get to that scholarship, opportunity, 2-year scholarship, they get sort of released, and you don't tend to see a lot said about that. But look, that's said and done. There's always an opportunity, even if a player is released at that point, they can get a scholarship. I speak from anecdotally from my experience, like when I was sort of working in the youth setup at Bury, for example, from 203 to 205ish, we had one example. It's like, Colin Kazim Richards, who I think, if memory serves me correct, got released from Arsenal 15s or something along them lines anyway. But he's made his way up to Bury from London, and he got a scholarship with us at Bury. Prior to me joining the club at that point, by the way, he got his scholarship. I mean, I remember Andy Hill spoke really highly of him. And then obviously sort of Chris Castle took over the youth setup, and we knew we had a special talent on board. But that's another story for another day. Eventually we'd get his sort of first team debut and professional contract, and obviously the rest is history, so to speak. He had an international career and played arguably at the highest level. And I'm sort of just, mentioning that because obviously it is possible that players, obviously, they do get released. There is the option. But obviously since then, I think there's been a lot of advancements in football. Absolutely. I think there is support available, at least in the conversations I've had with people in the game. Like there is support, I believe, available. So clubs have, I think, I stand corrected on this, guidance around supporting the players. at the point of when they get released. You have like exit trials, and I think there's other support options for the players, but there's better people than me to talk about that. And certainly the players, getting released, as best speaks to their club and family, or in that respect. But there are guidelines for clubs now, which is a good thing. But I would go so far to say that certainly in my opinion, there doesn't seem to be as much around that in the media, so to speak, or spoken about in social media. And I'm guessing because obviously the sort of scholarship, 2 years, they're there, they do the scholarship, the academy scholarship, and at the end of that, the goal is predominantly to get a professional contract. But at 16s, I suppose the goal is to sort of have the opportunity to go into football as a scholar and then stand opportunity to go on and be pro. But I think, certainly anecdotally, in my reflections, I think a lot of players in that situation, they may have a break from the game. They may go to an exit trial and get taken by another club. They might look at other opportunities like, colleges and that sort of stuff that offer football programs. They might sort of just make a clean break from football. They might play semi-pro. So there are various options, obviously, for players at that point. But I suppose the added pressure, I would say, at least in my opinion, for a lot of players, obviously sort of like, at that point, they're kind of doing that GCSE and that sort of has its own pressure. And then obviously the identity for players who might be in an academy set up since 9-year-old, and then they get told, well, actually we're not giving you a scholarship, can be a big thing for sure. And I don't think it's as spoken about as the actual academy scholars getting released. Well, at least that's my opinion. But you might think differently. You might sort of see it differently to me. But I think absolutely it's it can have a big impact on a player, no doubt, because their sort of identity, big part of the identity, how they define who they are in the context of football in one sense, and they got their hearts and get a scholarship and maybe going sort of pro, and then in the middle of sort of doing school GCSE exams as well. That's kind of that extra pressure as well. And if they've got the news they are being released, and to try and sort of focus on the exams and trying to get the best grades they can get is going to be a challenge. So I would think for sure it requires a lot of support from the club and school, in my opinion, and I'm sure schools and clubs offer it to a certain degree. But obviously these things affect different people in different ways as well. So that's an important thing to take on board too. But that's my take on it. It'd be great to hear what your take is on it. That's just my sort of thoughts, but always great to hear what your thoughts are too.